I get asked this all the time, at least one or two emails a week. Should I buy this Subaru? Should I buy this Outback? Is it a good deal on this Forester? Would you buy this used WRX? And I cannot ever give a definitive answer. It's always a depends upon. Every single used car purchase is different. No two are alike. The individual situation is case by case. Subarus are great cars. They are reliable, they are fun, they're dependable, and they're great in inclement weather. But there are some out there that raise a cautionary flag when looking at them in the used market. In today's video, we're going to go over some of these Subarus that are not junk. They're not something that you shouldn't own, but it should be looked at with scrutiny before purchasing used in certain conditions in certain ways. So let's go ahead and get into the video. So before we get into the list, a little bit of a disclaimer. Now, I'm not saying that every single Subaru on this list should be not bought, should be avoided like the plague. What I'm saying is you should use extra caution in purchasing these cars. Now, if one of these cars on the list is something you're looking at, if it's that particular year or particular generation, and it's got great maintenance history, it's got great service records, it could be a very good buy. Just the same as a quote-unquote good or trouble-free year model used Subaru that has no maintenance and no service history could be a potential disaster. You don't want to go into any used car buying situation blindly and just going off of generic, this model year is good, this generation is good, this engine is good, because again, it's a case-by-case situation that maintenance has a lot to do with, especially when higher mileage is involved. You want to make sure that that maintenance has been done, that service record is kept, and things are done properly. So number one on the list should come as no surprise to any of you long-term viewers, and that is buying a used WRX or STI that has been modified or heavily modified. Now, before you get antsy down in the comment section below, if you are a WRX or STI owner trying to sell one or just bought one, let me go over the reasons why. This is not applicable to everything, but anytime you see a modified WRX or STI in the used market, you should always be extremely cautious when buying it, because a lot of times WRX STIs are neglected for maintenance. A lot of times that money for mods is put into it before the money for the oil change, timing belt, transmission service, differential service, cooling system service, etc. is done. That is just how it goes in general speaking terms. Not saying every single one, but a lot of them fall into this category. Modifications trump the normal services and maintenance. Services and maintenance go to the wayside for the modifications and the customization. You have to worry about what was done to the car and how it was done. A lot of these modifications are done with no tuning and nothing that really works together. A lot of people buy modifications and just piecemeal them together instead of having a clear, concise plan in place for their WRX or STI build and getting supporting modifications. So there's lots of things to consider as far as the modified section goes. You also got to think about how the car was driven. A lot of times they are beaten on. They are driven hard a lot. They are launched a lot. You got to think about all the shock to the drivetrain, the transmission, the clutch, the half shafts. There is a lot that could go wrong very quickly with these cars. A lot of them are modified, as I said, without a tune, which means that most likely they are running lean and can have a ringland failure or an engine failure in short order. A lot of times, not saying actually not a lot of times, but I have seen a lot of examples of someone with a modified WRX or STI try to cover up the fact that it needs an engine replacement before selling the car, trying not to lose their butt, by putting a thicker oil or oil additives in there to quiet down a noisy engine or a rod-knocking engine. Always, always, always get a pre-purchase inspection when looking at a modified WRX or STI used. You want to make sure you're not buying something that's going to cost you more than you paid for it to get it driving down the road and reliable for you, unless you're looking for an absolute teardown project car. Just saying, WRX STIs that are modified or heavily modified in the used segment should be a huge red flag and gone into with a ton of caution before pulling the trigger and purchasing one. Now, number 2 on the list should come as no surprise given number 1 on the list, and number 2 is any cheap turbocharged EJ or F-Series cars. That would be the Forester XT, the Legacy GT, Outback XT, Baja Turbo, etc. Those EJ 255 cars, and we'll talk about the F-Series Forester XT, the last before the demise of the Turbo Forester. These cars, again, are one of those that have a lot of times an inflated price tag in the used market due to quote-unquote rarity, but more times than not, they are long in the tooth and have been neglected and or abused and could be a problem once you purchase them. Now, I'm not saying that's all of them. There are plenty of fine, clean, well-maintained examples of these cars out in the used market right now, but for every one of those clean, unmodified, and well-maintained ones, there's probably 5 or 6 that are not long for the scrapyard. A lot of these cars, again, were, as we talked about the WRX and STI, they were modified, they were driven hard, they were raced. A lot of times modification money went in place of maintenance money. All the same things we talked about with the WRX STIs being troublesome in the used market. These can be as well, especially with the known issues on these cars, turbo failure, and the same piston ringland failure as the 257 and the STI and the 255 and the WRX before the FA20 WRXs. So there's lots of potential for costly repairs buying these in the used market. Again, a pre-purchase inspection is heavily advised before getting one of these. Even when they're stock, they don't have to be modified. Always get a pre-purchase inspection on one of these turbocharged EJ cars. They're older. They have more moving parts. There's more things that can go wrong than a non-turbocharged one. So just be wise, pay the money, get a pre-purchase inspection, get a compression leak down test on the engine, make sure that's healthy, and just a good once over by either a Subaru dealership that you trust or a trusted Subaru independent repair facility. A lot of times they are very versed in doing these pre-purchase inspections for WRX STI and turbocharged vehicles, so shouldn't be any kind of a hassle going in and getting one done. Always be leery of a seller that is completely opposed to having an independent repair done before they sell you the car or you purchase the car from them. That is a red flag. Number 3 on the list of cars to potentially avoid or having a red flag would be any older EJ Series 2.5 liter non-turbo Subaru vehicle that does not have any service history or record of a head gasket replacement. Now, a lot of times when you look at these cars used, right now the prices can go from $4,000 to $400. A little bit more inflated nowadays than they were just a couple years ago, but that's about the range that most of these cars fall into, and they look like they could be a great buy, something to pick up for the kid going off to college, or something to beat around and keep miles off your newer or nicer vehicle. But if there's no history of those head gaskets being replaced, it could cost you a lot of money once you buy the car, probably more so than you purchased the car for. Now, we've talked about in the past how a lot of times you can do a visual inspection to see if the head gaskets are leaking or original on these older EJ series cars. It depends on what EJ engine you have, whether it be a single overhead cam or dual overhead cam engine is how they fail. The dual overhead cam 2.5s fail internally with combustion gases and the cooling jacket failing between them. These single overhead cams are much easier to spot, especially in a pre-purchase inspection deal when you're just wanting to look at the car in, say, a parking lot or the seller's home. You can stick your head up under the car and a lot of times see oil and or coolant leaking at the parting line between the block and the cylinder head because they leak oil and coolant externally. You always want to make sure that these have been replaced. They're known to fail, as we've talked about many, many times between 120 to 175,000 miles. That's the average range of the factory head gasket on these cars. So if it's a lower mileage and you think it's a great buy, it could have a head gasket issue and cost you, again, more than what you paid for the car used. So again, get it checked if you don't feel confident in checking yourself. And we have made videos in the past showing you how to look physically at the gasket, the top of the gasket where it protrudes between the block and the head, and see if it is that coated single layer gasket or if they have put the better and less fail prone multi-layer steel head gasket in place of it and had that repair done in the past. But always make sure when you're buying one of these that you know that the head gasket's been replaced, or that is part of the negotiation on the price, that if it hasn't been done, that that's a fairly expensive repair to pay someone to do, several $1,000s. So make sure that you know that going into the deal. Number 4 is early FB series engines with oil consumption issues. This covers both the 2.5 and the 2-liter. We're talking about the 2011 to 2014 Forester, 2012, 2013 Impreza, 2013, 2014 Crosstrek, and Legacy Outback models. Now, this was the first of the F-Series engines, introduced in the Forester in 2011 as the FB25B. These were known to have oil consumption issues in their early year models. Now, we've talked about oil consumption issues in many videos in the past. We've talked about how you can slow it down if your car is affected and out of warranty by switching from a 020 to a 530 using a thicker oil to slow that oil consumption down. We talk about the fact of why the oil consumption happened due to lower tension oil control rings, longer service intervals, sludge building up, those rings sticking, and oil getting in the combustion chamber and being burned and consumed. This was a known issue, still is a known issue, sporadically popping up on the F-Series engines, but more known for those early iterations. A lot of short blocks were replaced by Subaru under their extended warranty for oil consumption, and a lot of those early cars are no longer affected. They have been remedied with a short block replacement under warranty, but you do need to think about that going into purchasing this range of Subaru model used. Now, if they have service history proving that the short block was replaced and the oil consumption is not an issue anymore, then you have clean roads ahead, clear sailing, and should not worry. These are phenomenal cars. But if there is no service history, no history of a short block replacement under warranty, you need to be cognizant of the fact that you could be putting a quart or two of oil into these cars between oil changes. It's just going to keep happening. It's going to keep consuming oil, and could get very costly because the cost to repair it is replacing the engine. And a lot of times these cars, again, are in that range in the used market as far as price is concerned, about the same as what an engine replacement would be. So you don't want to buy one of these having a ton of oil consumption issues and have to pay more than you paid for the car to get a new engine or a new short block put in it to stave off these oil consumption issues. Some people don't mind, some people don't care. Again, with this, you're going to be spending money in engine oil between oil changes. You're going to be checking your oil frequently, because if you don't, it consumes too much oil and the oil level drops too low. You risk spinning a rod bearing and completely destroying or seizing the engine. So this is something you have to be very attentive to. You have to make sure you check your oil every time you're filling up, or at least once a week, to make sure that oil level is not dropping too rapidly so you don't cause mechanical damage to the engine. But just be wary of that, looking at these models, that oil consumption could be an issue and could potentially cost you money in an emissions controlled state by that oil consumption, that burned oil contaminating oxygen sensors and catalytic converters as well, leading to more costly repairs. So make sure going into buying these cars that there's a service history, or there is history of a repair done, or that going into it that it's going to consume oil. Number 5 on the list is high mileage early year model CVT equipped Subarus. So we're talking about the 2010 Outback and Legacy own. We're talking about those early Forester, Impreza, Crosstrek, etc. There are several common failures on the early CVTs, mainly the torque converter and the solenoid for the valve body. We've talked about these repairs, made videos on these repairs many times in the past, but can be a very costly repair. If you're looking at a 2010, 2011 Outback or Legacy with the TR690, there was a common failure point on the torque converter clutch where coming to a stop, the engine would stall out, similar to a manual transmission car coming up to a stop sign and not depressing the clutch before stopping the engine. It would stall the engine out, and that can be a very costly repair to have that new updated torque converter replaced. Now, most of these cars are at an age and a mileage where those torque converter failures have already been addressed, either under warranty or privately paid for and repaired. So most of these you should not have a concern about. But if you're looking at a 10 or 11 TR690 equipped Legacy or Outback, ask the owner if they know of any service or repair history on the torque converter. Also looking for that service history on the torque converter lockup duty solenoid or other solenoids inside the valve body, because the torque converter one seems to be the most failure prone, but any of the solenoids can fail in the valve body, and those valve bodies are almost $1,200 now, plus service and fluid, etc. It's a couple $1,000s for the repair on that torque converter or the valve body and the solenoid. So just make sure there's service history on that stuff. Those solenoids normally fail between about 120 to 200,000 miles, normally 175, somewhere in that range. So if you're in that range and there's no history of it been done, you can count on that being a sizable repair bill in the near future if you're picking one up in the used market, again, with no history of it. Also with the TR580 and the Forester Crosstrek and Impreza, again, the valve body concerns, not so much the torque converter, but the valve body concerns. We just did one, 2 weeks ago. It was a $2,400 bill at the end of the day for the valve body, labor, CVT fluid replacement, the relearn for that part. It's getting expensive. So if you pick up a used Crosstrek for $3,000 and then the valve body goes out, I mean, you're spending what you paid basically for the car to fix it right after. So when looking at these early CVT Subaru models in the used market, make sure there's service history or repair history for these repairs, or that it's something known that has happened on the vehicle. Sometimes you can go to Subaru, give them a VIN number. Sometimes they can look back and see if it's been repaired for you, but a lot of times that's if you know someone at the dealership. But make sure that's done, or you might have a costly repair after picking one up. Number 6 on the list is a very popular buy for a lot of families, and that is early models of the Ascent, specifically 2019, 2020. The Ascent came into the world as a replacement to the Tribeca that failed pretty miserably for Subaru as their larger family model. And, it had some growing pains in the early years, starting off as a brand new car, brand new platform, brand new everything for Subaru, essentially. And a lot of the issues came down to the CVT. There were a lot of CVT failures, a lot of CVT issues with the early Ascents. There was also some concerns with the FA24, the 2.4 liter turbocharged engine in it, as it was very early on in that car. And there were some oil leakage issues, some other concerns, PCV issues. A lot of that stuff, again, has been worked out on these 19s and 20s. But again, service history, service history, service history. You'll hear me say that on every single one of these. As long as the service history points to these issues being resolved, you should be good buying a 2019 or 2020 Ascent. But just go into it with caution. It's a first-year model. There was issues at hand. Just make sure that everything was taken care of under the warranty, under the extended warranty, and you should have smooth sailing. Everything in the Ascent now is pretty much tightened up and, repaired or figured out. Buying a modern Ascent, but most people aren't buying a brand new $50,000+ loaded Ascent. They're looking for something more reasonable in the used market, and just so you don't get burned, make sure you get those service records, pre-purchase inspection, make sure everything's good, because you get one of these and the CVT goes out again, you're looking at $8,000-9,000 for a replacement. So I doubt anyone has that laying around to throw into a used car they just purchased. Number 7 on the list is, in general terms, any Subaru with a set of mismatched tires. I would not buy any Subaru with a set of mismatched tires, as mismatching tires, as a lot of you know, is a good way to destroy or damage the drive line and the all-wheel drive system in your Subaru. Now, there's lots of reasons why people mismatch tires on Subarus. Either they just don't know or they can't afford to put a full set of matching tires on the car when disaster strikes, and that's totally understandable. But that could be a sign of more maintenance neglect and abuse to the car, just an easy way to spot it. So if you see a Subaru out there in the used market and it doesn't have a set match of 4 tires, you could have potential issues with the all-wheel drive system, with the differentials, etc. And also could have an owner that maybe couldn't have put the extra money needed into proper maintenance and care for the years that they owned it. So again, red flag, just go in cautionary when looking at one of these vehicles in the used segment. And number 8 on the list kind of ties into number 7, and that is buying any used Subaru with absolutely no service or maintenance records on hand. Buying a used Subaru can be a great car, once again, but without knowing how it was taken care of, especially if it's higher mileage, like 120, 150, 175,000 miles, if there's no service history at all, you have no idea what you're getting your hands on. You could need a lot of costly maintenance and service right off the boat, being more so again than the purchase price of the vehicle. Do not go in blind. Do not go in buying a car that they cannot tell you what was done, when was done, especially if they've owned the vehicle for quite a while. Now, there are a lot of people out there that just drive a vehicle, put gas in it, and change the oil on occasion, and that is not good for the reliability or long-term life of a vehicle, especially a Subaru. You cannot neglect a Subaru, and expect it to perform at the top tier level. So anytime you're going and looking at one of these higher mileage, older Subarus, if they cannot provide you any kind of receipts, any kind of record of maintenance done, services done, etc., red flag, caution, back away from, or at least get a independent specialist to do a pre-purchase inspection. A lot of times, a lot of the stuff can be easily detected in that pre-purchase inspection, whether the spark plugs have been replaced, whether the differentials have been serviced, CVT has been serviced, all that stuff can pretty much be seen in a good, thorough inspection. So it's not saying never buy a used Subaru without these records, but just be leery going into it that you could be buying a costly list of repairs after the car. So what would I buy instead? What do I buy when I'm in the market for a used Subaru? Again, we've covered a lot of this so far in the list. Look for a clean car that has a matching set of tires. Look for one that has a good service history, a good record of service and maintenance performed. Even if it's higher mileage, that doesn't automatically mean caution. I've bought plenty of Subarus over 200,000 miles, and they have been phenomenal, great, reliable cars. Two examples, my 2002 LL Bean, I bought at 230,000 miles. It has 305,000 miles on it now. And my 2015 Outback Limited I purchased with 213,000 miles. It has 276,000 miles on it now. Owned both cars for many, many years and gave me lots and lots of reliable service and safe transport. But again, when looking at one of these used cars, again, if you're not a mechanic, always get a pre-purchase inspection. Make sure there's service and maintenance records. And, other than that, you're pretty much set to go. There's not that much complexity in buying a used Subaru versus any other used vehicle. The same things are applicable to any of them. You want to make sure that it was taken care of, make sure it was serviced, make sure it wasn't abused, make sure it wasn't modified in a poor way. Pretty much all that you need to know going into it. Main thing, find you a good independent Subaru specialist, because you're going to want to make friends with them because they will be servicing and taking care of your vehicle, and they will also be doing your pre-purchase inspection if you're not going to your local Subaru dealership. So those are the used Subarus I would avoid or just be very scrutinous of before purchasing. Modified WRX STI, early EJ turbo cars, EJs with head gasket history, FBs with oil consumption history, early CVT models, early Ascent models that have CVT concerns, Subarus with mismatched tires, or Subarus with no maintenance or records of any kind for service. Now, not saying, again, that these are all horrible cars and should always be avoided. I'm not saying there aren't great examples of cars in these categories. What I'm saying is just be cautious when looking at them used. They could cost you a lot of money in the end if they are what they are, if they have the known issues in those generations. So guys, let me know your thoughts and feelings down below. Did I miss one? Did I get the list right? Is this pretty accurate to what you see looking at used Subarus or Subarus in general? Do you own a used Subaru? Do you only buy used Subarus? What tips and tricks would you give to others in the comments on buying a used Subaru vehicle? Let me know down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for future Subaru and tool content. I'll see you guys in the next one.